The lights above the late show stage were bright, almost too bright. The cameras rolled, the crowd buzzed, and something in the air felt tight, like a balloon about to pop. This wasn't just another night of jokes and laughs. It felt different. The set looked like a late-night talk show, sure, but the mood had shifted. It wasn't just entertainment, it was something bigger, like the calm before a storm. Stephen Colbert stepped onto the stage, smiling like he always does. But there was an edge to it. His eyes scanned the crowd, soaking in the noise, the mix of cheers, some scattered boos, and the kind of held breath that only shows up when the room knows it's about to see something real. He straightened his jacket, paused, then leaned into the mic. "Well," he said, grinning, "tonight we welcome royalty. MAGA royalty." Laughter broke out, loud and sharp. A few claps turned into a wave. Some faces stayed still, arms crossed. That's how you knew this night wasn't going to stay funny for long. The guest was J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States. Not a senator anymore, not just a best-selling author, not just a man with a complicated past. He was now Donald Trump's second-in-command, the number 2 in a government led by a man who once called late-night hosts enemies of the people. And here Vance was, walking into the lion's den, into a studio that wasn't exactly filled with fans. Colbert didn't waste time. He gave the crowd the quick backstory. "Remember when J.D. Vance called Trump noxious? Said he was dangerous, unfit? Yeah. Well, turns out the job of vice president comes with memory loss." The crowd roared. Some booed, some sat quiet, arms still crossed. And offstage, Vance waited behind the curtain, likely hearing every word. It set the tone. This wasn't going to be a polite back and forth. This was going to be a test, a tug-of-war between two very different kinds of power. One built on TV and truth-telling with a grin, the other built on loyalty, ambition, and something harder to pin down. The camera zoomed in on Colbert as he leaned into the desk. "Tonight we welcome the man who went from warning America about Trump to carrying his water. Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance." The crowd's reaction hit like a wave, some clapping, others dead silent, a few with sharp side eyes. The stage lights shifted, the music played, and just like that the curtain opened. The storm had arrived. The moment J.D. Vance stepped out from behind the curtain, the air in the room dipped a little. Not colder exactly, just heavier. He smiled, shook Colbert's hand, gave a small wave to the audience. On the surface, it all looked normal, but you could feel it. The tightness in Vance's smile, the careful way Colbert leaned in. It was like watching two people who used to be on the same team, but now played for opposite sides, both pretending they were still in warm-up mode. Colbert started soft. "Mr. Vice President," he said with a grin, "how's public service treating you? Getting enough naps in between crisis meetings?" The audience chuckled, and Vance nodded like he got the joke. "Well, I don't nap much," he said, "but it's a real honor to serve the country." His tone was smooth, but his eyes stayed locked in like he was waiting for the first punch. Colbert kept it light for a minute. He asked about the second Trump term, how it felt different from the first, what it meant to build on that legacy. Vance gave measured answers. He said the administration had learned a lot and was ready to move fast. He didn't say what they were moving toward. He didn't need to. Everyone watching had already guessed. Then came the first twist of the knife. "You know," Colbert said, picking up a copy of Hillbilly Elegy from under his desk, "this book used to be a memoir. Now it feels more like a MAGA symphony in B-flat. You thinking of writing a sequel or just letting Trump do the footnotes?" The crowd laughed again, this time louder. Vance smiled, but just barely. "I think the book still speaks for itself," he said, "even if some people stopped listening after the first chapter." That was the tone of the night. Two men smiling with their mouths while something sharp moved behind their words. Colbert shifted in his chair, relaxed but sharp. "So," he said, "when the president speaks, do you ever get to jump in? Or does he just use you as a podium stand?" Laughter again, and this time Vance looked directly at him. "I serve the president," he said flatly, "and I'm proud too." Colbert didn't back off. No doubt, he replied. Though I gotta wonder, do you miss being the guy with your own voice? Or is that just too 2016? That one landed. You could feel it. Vance's smile faded just for a second before he reached for his water. He didn't answer right away. He just took a sip, then said, "Voices change. That's how we grow." It wasn't a real answer, but it was enough to keep the knives from cutting too deep, at least for now. The room sat on edge. The masks were still on, but they were starting to slip. Colbert leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on Vance, tapping his fingers on the desk, like a drummer waiting for the beat to drop. The tension was no longer hidden. It was sitting right there between them, stretching out across the set, turning even the laughter in the room into something tight and unsure. Then came the question. Calm, slow but with a blade tucked neatly inside. When, Colbert asked, did the vice president become a press secretary? The crowd reacted instantly. Some laughs, some gasps, a few uneasy shifts in their seats. Vance smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His hand adjusted his cuff like it might buy him a second to think. Colbert didn't wait. You once said, and I'm quoting here, that Donald Trump was like America's Hitler audition tape. And now you're standing beside him calling him sir. What happened? That landed hard. Vance didn't flinch, but his mouth tensed just slightly. He straightened his back, took a deep breath, and gave the kind of answer that sounded like it had been practiced in a mirror. Well, Stephen, I've learned a lot since then. Growth is part of leadership. It's easy to criticize from the sidelines. It's different when you're responsible for real decisions that affect millions of people. Colbert nodded slowly, like he was listening, but his face said otherwise. He leaned in again, voice a little lower. Is that really growth, he asked, or just fear of being left behind? That one shook something. The crowd murmured, low, uneasy, curious. Vance's jaw moved slightly like he was grinding his teeth. He gave a tight smile, but he didn't speak right away. There wasn't a sound in the room beyond the hum of the lights and the weight of that question. Colbert didn't give him room to reset. You used to say the court was broken, too political, too partisan. You even wrote op-eds about it. And now you're out here defending every single pick Trump makes like it's gospel. What changed? Did the court get better? Or did your ambitions just catch up with your mouth? Vance finally broke the silence. The court has changed. This is a different time. And I believe the president has made the right decisions for the country. But do you believe that? Colbert asked, sharper now. Or are you just saying what you're told? The audience was silent now. Even the clappers didn't know where to jump in. Vance stared at Colbert, trying to keep his face steady. But the crack had opened. The difference between what he once was and what he had become wasn't something he could hide anymore. Not here. Not tonight. The slope was slippery, and Vance was already sliding. Colbert sat up a little straighter in his chair, his tone turning from playful to sharp. The audience could feel the shift. No more jokes about books or who's holding the microphone. This was the real part. The part where people at home leaned in a little closer. So, Colbert said, calm but firm, let's talk about January 6th. Vance didn't blink. He kept his eyes steady, nodding slightly as if he'd known this moment was coming. Colbert continued. Were you watching the same riot the rest of us were? Because I remember broken windows, bear spray, police getting crushed against doors, and a noose set up outside. But somehow your party still calls it a protest that got out of hand. Is that how you'd describe it too? Vance adjusted his tie and kept his voice cool. What happened that day was wrong. People who broke the law should be held accountable. But I think this country needs to stop living in the past and start focusing on the future. We have real problems to solve. The audience murmured. Some claps, some side comments. Colbert didn't bite on the distraction. Okay, he said. I'll take that as your polite way of saying, let's change the subject. But we're not moving on just yet. Not until we talk about this straight. Colbert leaned in. Do you believe Joe Biden fairly won the 2020 election? It was a clear question, one that needed a yes or no. But Vance paused. Too long. He gave a soft breath through his nose, and when he spoke, the words came slow. I believe there were real concerns in that election. I believe some states changed their rules without going through their legislatures. I think millions of Americans still have questions. Colbert didn't even wait for him to finish. That's not an answer, he snapped. You're the Vice President of the United States. You can't duck basic facts like a dodgeball. The crowd broke into applause, loud and sharp. You could see Vance's jaw clench. His smile vanished. His hands folded tighter in his lap. Colbert didn't let the energy drop. Millions of Americans believe in Bigfoot too. That doesn't make it real. You had a chance to calm things down. Instead, you ran toward the fire with a bucket full of gasoline. And now you want everyone to forget it happened? Vance stiffened. I've always stood for the Constitution. Colbert shook his head. Then say it. Say Biden won. Say it like someone who believes in the system you swore to protect. The audience waited. Vance looked out across the crowd, then back at Colbert. But he didn't say it. He just sat there silent, the question still hanging in the air like smoke. And in that silence, the room got colder. The cracks in the conversation weren't cracks anymore. They were wide, gaping spaces that no polite answer could cover. Vance leaned forward, his voice lower now but tighter, sharper, almost like a warning. This isn't journalism. This is ambush. The temperature in the room dropped. You could feel it. The audience got quiet again. Not tense like before, but curious. Waiting. Colbert raised his eyebrows, tilting his head just slightly. Ambush, he repeated, like he wasn't sure he'd heard right. Then he smiled. Not a warm one. More like the kind of smile you flash when you know someone just gave you exactly what you needed. You're the Vice President of the United States, Colbert said. And I'm asking questions millions of Americans are asking. If that feels like an ambush, maybe it says more about your answers than my questions. Vance's face didn't move, but his hand tapped the table once, twice, then stopped. He shook his head, looking out toward the audience now. This whole thing, he said, it's not a conversation. It's leftist performance art. Colbert didn't even flinch. He leaned back in his chair, calm as ever, and shot back. If this were performance art, you'd be the mime, silent on every moral question. The audience exploded. Laughter, applause, whistles. A few people stood up. Vance's eyes narrowed. He didn't find it funny. He slapped the desk. Not hard, but enough to turn heads. Colbert didn't miss a beat. Don't worry, he said with a grin. I'll tell Trump you stood your ground for 5 whole minutes. That was it. Vance stood up. The chair screeched just a bit as it slid back. He ripped the mic off his jacket in one fast motion, the wire pulling with a small snap. Clown show, he muttered, not even looking at Colbert now, just turning, walking off stage, the camera catching the back of his head as he left under the hot studio lights. The room was stunned. Some cheered. Others just sat there, unsure if it was part of the show or something very real happening live, on camera. Colbert turned to the audience, still calm, still smiling, but this time it had a different weight to it. He didn't have to say anything else. The moment said enough. The camera stayed on Colbert for a second longer than usual. The chair across from him sat empty, the microphone wire still dangling off the edge. Nobody said a word. The band wasn't playing. The audience wasn't sure if they were supposed to clap or not. It was quiet enough to hear Colbert set down his pen on the desk. He picked up his mug, took a slow sip of water, and then gently placed it back. Well, he said, looking straight into the camera, voice steady. That escalated, like a golf cart on fire. Some laughter, not loud, just enough to break the silence. Colbert sat back, exhaled once, and added, Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the United States and his temper. This time the laughter came, stronger. The band picked up, just a light riff, nothing over the top, the kind of music that says, we're still here. Then Colbert shifted gears. The smirk faded. He looked serious now, not angry, not sad, just clear. You know, he said, I don't like when guests walk out. It's not fun, it's not good TV. But I also don't like pretending. He glanced at the chair again. Truth is hard. It burns. And some folks prefer shade. The camera zoomed in a bit. You could see it in his face. He meant every word. I ask questions because they matter. Because if we're going to sit here and smile while the country's on fire, we're not a late-night show. We're a campfire sing-along while the house burns down. The audience clapped now. Louder. Some stood. The band leaned in and played louder, too, the music rising just under his voice. "We'll be right back," Colbert said, cool again, with just the hint of a smile returning. Cut to commercial. By morning, it was everywhere. The clip of J.D. Vance standing up, yanking off his mic and storming off Colbert's stage was on every screen. Phones, TVs, laptops, even the gas station pump. The shot of Colbert sitting there cool as ever, tossing out that line, "If this were performance art, you'd be the mime, silent on every moral question, spread like wildfire." People turned it into t-shirts before lunch. TikToks, reaction videos, remixes. Colbert's face was edited onto a gladiator, a chess grandmaster, even a Jedi. Meanwhile, the right-wing media machine kicked into high gear. Vance's walkout was framed as a power move. A Fox News host called it a heroic stand against late-night propaganda. On a conservative podcast, someone said Vance didn't walk off, he walked tall. There were hashtags like JDS Strong under Clownbert, but the tone was defensive. You could hear it. It wasn't just spin, it was damage control. Then came the Trump post. Bold text on Truth Social, all caps. "Stephen Colbert is a disgrace. JD showed strength. Never back down." It got picked up by every outlet, from the biggest networks to parody accounts. Trump loyalists reposted it endlessly. But outside the MAGA circle, the reaction was different. People weren't buying it. Colbert's clip had struck a nerve, not just because it was funny, but because it felt like something had cracked. Comment sections were full of people saying things like, "Finally, someone said it to their face." Others shared the video saying, "This is why comedy matters." Even a few moderate voices who usually kept quiet started weighing in. They weren't defending Vance. They were questioning why a vice president couldn't answer basic questions without melting down. By the end of the day, one thing was clear. Whatever Vance thought he was proving by walking off, the internet saw something else. The narrative was out of his hands. And Colbert? He wasn't just the host who clowned the VP. He was the guy who didn't flinch. The next night, Colbert stepped back onto his stage, the crowd already buzzing. There was a noticeable energy in the air. It wasn't just any normal show, but a moment of reflection on the night before. He stood at his desk, took a breath, and then let the audience settle. He started by addressing the elephant in the room, J.D. Vance's exit. But instead of diving into the usual comedy punchlines, Colbert slowed down his delivery, making sure the weight of his words landed. "You know, I've been thinking about last night," he began. "What we witnessed wasn't just a clash between a comedian and a politician, it was a clash between performance and principle. One person playing the game, the other pretending the game doesn't matter." He paused, letting the crowd absorb it. "And here's the thing," Colbert continued, his tone turning slightly more pointed. "You can't fake honor. You either have it or you don't." He quoted Vance's own words from his memoir. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The crowd let out a soft murmur, some nodding in agreement, others still processing the intensity of the night before. Colbert gave a small smile, one that was less about humor and more about the quiet satisfaction of a truth spoken. Finally, he glanced up at the camera, his usual wit flickering back into his eyes. "We asked for honesty. We got a sprint. Thanks for the cardio." The audience erupted into applause, a mix of relief and appreciation for Colbert's unshaken stance. As the applause continued, Colbert leaned back, almost relaxed now, letting the moment breathe. The camera pulled away slowly, fading to black as the crowd's cheers filled the space, leaving behind the echo of an unforgettable showdown.